What's up, everyone, and welcome to Mintcast, the official podcast of MintPress News. I'm your host, Mnar Adley, founder and director of MintPress. It's been 1 month since the overthrow of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the rise of al-Qaeda in Syria, which has raised more questions than answers. How will the new government led by Abu Mohammed al-Jolani act? We have to remember, this is the same leader that is part of al-Qaeda's branch in Syria and was once part of ISIS and on the terror watch list for Great Britain and the United States. So what does the replacement of Syria as a member of the so-called axis of resistance with a leader allying himself to Israel and the United States mean for Iraq, Lebanon, and the rest of the region? What is being presented by Western corporate media as a win for revolution are hiding the reality that this will only suit Western, Israeli, and Turkish economic and geopolitical means. So how exactly will all this play out in the region, and what does it mean for grassroots resistance to Western colonialism in West Asia? To discuss all of these questions and more, I'm delighted to be joined again by Ghadi Francis for part 2 of our ongoing discussion about everything West Asia. You can find part 1 of our interview with Ghadi on our YouTube channel. Ghadi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Mnar. Thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
Well, we're honored to have you back with us, Ghadi. But before we get started, I want to remind our listeners and viewers that this show is 100% funded by you. After an organized campaign to target MintPress financially, we were banned by PayPal and by TikTok and had our fundraisers taken down by GoFundMe. Because of this, we rely heavily on our readers, viewers, and listeners to support our work. So please join us on Patreon today. So just to start, Ghadi, it has now been 1 month since Bashar al-Assad fled the country and HTS leader Mohammed al-Jolani came to power. Jolani has obviously already made some huge changes, both internally and externally, most notably allowing Israel to completely destroy Syria's military bases and equipment and stand by as Israel takes more Syrian land and water. So what have you made of this first month of office of this new leadership? And where do you think Syria is headed?
Well, it's unfortunately headed where we foresaw in a way, because it all looked like the normalization kind of camp that is going to govern in Syria. It is just a junction between Turkish and Zionist expansionist programs by now. The problem in Syria is that too much of poverty, sanctions, war, internal tension, the brutal regime that was in office, and all of these accumulated facts, they put pressure on the Syrian people to the extent where they were like at a point where they don't care about anything. They just want to see what is the taste or the type of the story on the other side. Many of the people did not care to talk about Israel on day 1, 2, 3, 5. And up until now, they're not even recognizing the fact that Israel destroyed any potential Syrian strength. Syria as a nation is destroyed on the military side right now. Nobody even wants to talk about it. Nobody even wants to release any statement about it. Not the leadership, nor the people, nor the Syrian activists, or the Syrian so-called neo-politicians that are emerging. This is the danger about it. On the other side, what you see are ongoing tensions, sectarian kind of chaotic tensions that are bred and fed by facts that are happening on the ground. Many of the crimes are not reported. Many of the crimes are not shot and taken videos of. A lot of vengeance is happening, and Syria is a very diverse community. So now they are turning them from Syrians into sects and parts, and they are further escalating the residues of a civil war, and this is more and more dangerous to the unity of Syria. So now what you have is a ready to divide Syria and a weaponless Syria. This is the most important part in speaking about nations. You speak about the people and their unity, and you speak about the capacity of the state. Unfortunately, the Syrians are in such a position of, I don't want to take it lightly. It's not easy to be ruled for 50 years of one brutal regime, but still, it's not comprehensible at that point that nobody's speaking about Israel and nobody's speaking about other very dangerous things that the Jolani HTS governance is starting to do. Where, for example, they did not speak about elections, they did not speak about referendums, they did not speak about constitutions, they did not speak about dates or deadlines for all of the above. And they started directly changing in educational systems, changing some people in some positions. And it's like pick and choose at that point. Some people were part of the former regime, were active parts of the status quo of getting here in Syria, but they're still inside. And others are being treated without any courts of justice. It's enough to say that this was a part of the regime to go and attack them, to take and confiscate their land, their home, and also to kill them. All of these are being uh, on the ground. This is being reported in Syria. And this would tell you that whatever is happening in Syria, it's not the end, it's a phase. Because chaos is still in position, even if they are in denial, and even if the media is a part of the oppression. You cannot say any word in terms of Syria against the narrative. You will be attacked left, right, and center, Manar, by all kinds of real people and bots in the same narrative. I tried it and I dare anyone to try it. Any tweet, any content that you put about the Israeli aggression in Syria without speaking about HTS, without speaking about Bashar al-Assad, without saying any word other than a content of what Israel is doing to Syria, you will be attacked brutally online because it is not by chance. It is the active warfare on our brains and minds to shut them up and to never speak about what Israel is doing to Syria. But I want to tell you, all of these are happening now in Syria, but this will not make us lose hope because it wasn't better before. It's something like being in denial. All of the atrocities that are happening in Syria today and all of the facts that are unfolding in front of our eyes, they should not really jeopardize our evaluation of what is Syria as a nation, because it was in denial anyways. Israel was there, it was attacking Syria for a decade now, every day, almost every day.
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight. This is one. Number two, the Syrian army was being destroyed every day. Life was being sucked out of the nation in economy and in society and in stability in every way. So did not really just fall overnight. And sometimes it's good to face the facts rather than be in denial. And some part of me is very optimistic towards the fact that now everything is doing what they are, regardless how many PR sessions and campaigns Jolani will have, Abu Mohammed Jolani, and if he renames himself as Ahmad al-Shara. If he doesn't really put a deadline for an election or a constitution, he is still just another emir. But the only difference is that this time he didn't even have to fight to take this imara. The Turks gave it to him.
That's a good point. And I think a lot of people forget the fact that Turkey has been supporting this group from the very beginning, sending arms, sending money. And although Jolani has allowed Israel to destroy all of the military equipment, steal more Syrian land, and expand his occupation in the south of Syria, near the Golan Heights, really, Turkey has been one of the main beneficiaries of what's happening in Syria. And I think a lot of people would be shocked. You and I are not shocked because, we follow this kind of news regularly, but they would be shocked to know that, Turkey is just as expansionist as Israel. It has a lot of agendas and goals inside Syria. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Some might argue that in many ways it's even more dangerous than Israel, because Israel is not relatable to the people, while Turkey would sneak in under the banner of Islam and relatability, and like relations with and some people would revere being ruled by a Turkish occupation. We still now argue with people when we call the Ottoman occupation. And I'm speaking about an occupation in Lebanon and Syria and Greater Syria. It was centuries worth of years. They occupied this land for centuries as Ottoman Empire. And tens of thousands of people were killed and massacres happened and oppression. They even it was known ways and ways of killing and beheading and all kinds of atrocities are always attributed to the Ottoman era in the coastal region from Palestine to Lebanon to Syria, okay? But till date, we still argue sometimes with people when we call it an occupation. They say, no, it was not an occupation, it was the empire. Man, you were being occupied by people from somewhere else. They used to take your land and to confiscate it and to tell you how to rule yourself. It was an ABC of an occupation. But because of the relatability, some people were like gladly being occupied, gladly being oppressed. And this tells you that the problem is way more than the politics and the wars. It's about the way of thinking and the mindset and the actual enlightenment and the actual civilized community that can build the progress. So the Ottomans, the occupation, in many ways could be more dangerous than the Israelis, because Israelis are known, it's a fact that they are from the 1948 till they are people who came from all across the world and took our land and are still doing it. They are still doing settlements. They are still killing our people. So it's an ongoing massacre in front of our eyes. If you forgot it, you could see it televised for the past year. But the problem with the Turks is that they act like friends. So you go in Gaza today and people in Gaza think the Turks are on their side, while the Turks are actually funding and doing business with the Israelis, keeping them alive to kill more people in Gaza. The danger is that the mindset and the soft power of the neo-Ottoman Erdogan in the region has surpassed the levels of history and religion into a more intertwined kind of expansionism and occupation. So I'm saying all of this as an introduction to get you right to the point of Syria, where you and your viewers want to know. The Turks have been in Aleppo even before the war, even before the Syrian uprising, even before 2011. They know exactly every single industry in Syria, and the money makers and the people and the sheikhs and the agriculture, especially in northernmost Syria. And Bashar al-Assad further escalated their deaths by helping them and by bringing them in the beginning of his rule. And it was something like a honeymoon between the Turks and the Syrians, especially in Aleppo. The soft power of the Turkish Recep Tayyip Erdogan has not started today. The occupation that you behold today is not the fruit of today's work. It was all different once the uprising started. Turkey, southernmost Turkey, which is also referred to by many Syrians as occupied Syria, Ghazi Antab, Diyarbakir, Hatay region, these areas that are South Turkey today are also known as occupied Syria because they were given to the Turks 100 years ago after the World War, by the way. So they even took a part of this land. Many of the southernmost regions in Turkey are like inhabited by citizens who are Syrian, but now speak Turkish and now are Turkish. And this is very well known fact to anybody who knows the Turkish demographics and the Turkish politics. Hatay region is anti-Erdogan, by the way, because it's inhabited by coastal area. This coastal area was inhabited historically by Alawites. So these are Turkish Alawites that are in the first place, Syrians occupied by Turkey, but this land was taken and is now a coastal region that brings money and power to Erdogan and to the Turks. This is how they work in the region. This is what they want from northern Iraq. This is what they want in Nineveh. This is what the Turks want in Aleppo. This is what the Turks want everywhere around them, because some nations breed on expansionism, and this, some might argue that this is power and this is like, may the best man win. So when the Syrian uprising started, the Turks directly started their work on Syria and on the Syrian north by making centers, taking in people. People now speak Turkish. Some are even dual citizens, and taking and making operations room for all this, for arms, for weapons, for money, for activists, for media. I personally was able to go and to document the free parts of Syria. They were like al-Manatiq al-Muharrara, the parts that were not governed by the Syrian regime. In 2012, I even reached to Al-Bab, to Manbij, Jarablus. These are places that I got to via Turkey while the Syrian regime was fighting with these groups in that region. So Turkey was directly funding and helping and being the crossing bridge to anybody who wanted to do anything in any place in northernmost Syria. After all these years in the war, Erdogan tried via the Russians different ways and different methods of taking his wins or cashing his wins in Syria. In Astana talks before the fall of Bashar al-Assad, there were different trials, and as per the reports, the Russians tried to convince Bashar al-Assad to sit down and to manage a deal with Erdogan because he is capable of taking everything. And Bashar al-Assad refused, and it was the famous quote-unquote, what shall we do? Drink juice together? This was the statement of Bashar al-Assad, which in his very twisted language probably meant that unless he will take his army outside of Syria, there's nothing to talk about. We're not going to sit down and meet unless he's going to make concessions. But little did he know, or little did he want to tell himself, Bashar al-Assad, that the Turks were able to come to Damascus when they chose to, and when the Russians just like were hopeless about it. So all of that, Mnar, was long, for maybe 10 minutes talking, but this is only maybe 10% when we're really speaking about how the Turkish soft power plays in Syria. It is a long overdue known fact that the Turks can do this. But my question is, for how long can they sustain it like that? And if the region doesn't want, we're speaking about Saudi Arabia, we're speaking about the United Arab Emirates, we're speaking about Jordan, we're speaking about Egypt, we're speaking about, we don't know about Iran. So if you have all these powers in the region not so happy about what you're doing in Syria, it's not going to work.
And Ghadi, what's really interesting is, I always say, like, Americans are the most propagandized people on the planet, but people in the Middle East can be propagandized too. And something that I read a while back when I was doing reporting on Syria is that Turkey was funding a propaganda campaign in the Middle East through its soap operas. I mean, it was trying to push the soft power through their soap operas. I mean, who doesn't like a good Turkish soap opera? But it's even within means that people don't even understand that Turkey has always been pushing itself onto the Middle East, but especially on the Syrian people. And these are just ways that media really can work to manipulate people, even just through mainstream media soap operas that are broadcasting on TV. And you just reminded me of that, soft power point.
It's but even here in Lebanon, Mnar, it's even on every Arab streaming platform.
Yeah.
Even now we have Syrian actors and Lebanese actresses and actors that are reproducing buying Turkish drama series and just acting that story as if we don't have enough to talk about in our community.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Ghadi, you've spoken to and have met as part of, groups with Hezbollah political leaders. And so I think a lot of people are wondering, what is the future of Hezbollah, considering that Israel has, broken the ceasefire agreement? They're continuing to bomb South Lebanon, and the resistance camps inside Syria have been closed down. So what can you tell us from your conversations and your knowledge about the future of Hezbollah in Lebanon?
I think it's very unpredictable how Hezbollah would be acting out after the end of the ceasefire, because they have been saying that we're just like that for now. If this continues after the 60-day ceasefire, we don't know what we would do. So when we're speaking about Hezbollah today, we have to really segregate between the politics and the military, because at times like this, when in the politics, the Americans and the Israelis and the Western camp have won, they have imposed a new order in the region, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza. I mean, so this new shape does not really change the facts on the ground, because anybody who chose to be in Hezbollah from Lebanon did not really have to pick and choose. It's more of an existential choice for them, because they needed to be armed, they needed to be weaponized in order to protect themselves from an ongoing ethnic cleansing, occupying, rogue regime that is on their doorstep since 1948, killing their children and attacking their hospitals and their journalists and everyone, actually. And because for so long in Lebanon, these people were never protected. It was different shapes and forms of resistances that took over the protection. So you saw Palestinian resistance groups in the beginning, some secular resistance groups, some Arabists, some communists, some nationalists. And then when the Islamic politics rose in the region with the Islamic Revolution in Iran, it was the Islamic Revolution in Lebanon. So they called it like that. And then they started an Islamic resistance. But the people, the actual men and women that became that resistance, were men that were probably Fatah few years before that. So I'm sorry, I'm speaking history every time you ask me, but I think you like it. So because it gives more context to people who do not really follow the history of our region to understand how we came here. The people in Lebanon, of all shapes and forms, of all sects, they have been under the attacks of the Israelis ever since Palestine was occupied, even before there was a declaration of something called Israel in the occupied Palestinian land. Even in year 1925, even some incidents happened in Palestine under the British rule, and some even before, in the end of the 19th century. We are speaking facts that were written in travel books, that were written in history, and that are known. Ever since they started to bring Jewish settlers and Jewish migration started to be brought from Europe and other parts of the world into this region, there were clashes and there were resistance forms of all shapes and groups. Every time there were hostilities, and then the big Nakba started, and with it the big revolution. In Hezbollah, in Lebanon, and in the present, Hezbollah is in the parliament. It has a bloc. It has the majority of the votes of the people in the south and in Beqa and in Beirut and in many places in Lebanon. And with the alliances, they have formed a decisive force in the politics, parliament, government, judicial systems, even military people. So they are in the state, in the Lebanon state. These parts that are called Hezbollah cannot be stepped over regardless of what happens on the military side, because they represent around 1 million and 1.2 million Lebanese citizens, which is around 33 to 38% of the Lebanese population. You cannot disregard them. So this is the politics side. As per the military side, whatever the deal is, they tell you they're going to take the rockets, Hezbollah's rockets. Well, Hezbollah has men who know how to manufacture these rockets. Don't you understand that the Yemenis and the Gazans were able to make something out of nothing and fight you with? Don't you understand that even if they... Do you know, when people, they're speaking about Hezbollah being disarmed, southern Litani, how long does it take you to bike from northern Litani to southern Litani? So what? You know, we're speaking about a very little country in a very, very little area in comparison to the measure of the war and to the measure of the capacity of any kind of rocket from 20 kilometers south or north in such a war. Because we're speaking about Hezbollah that was able to send rockets to Eilat, to southernmost Palestine, sometimes during the past war. So on the military side, even if some shape of disarming will happen in the politics, I don't think that the people, the men who fought for all these years are just gonna retire now. And I don't think that the men and the women who buried some today, hours before we started this interview, Manar, there was a man in a funeral in South Lebanon burying all his family. And they were lost in the rubble for all that time. They're not going to get over it and just change their mind. The vengeance is big. The martyrdom is way too big. And the prices and the losses are too big. And even if we don't talk about it, even if the media doesn't want to talk about it, this doesn't get erased in collective memories and in collective society identities. So Hezbollah does not change overnight. It does not vanish from Lebanese politics overnight. It is passing through a very testing time. And I tell you, if Hezbollah as an organization emerges from that stronger or weaker, it does not change the fact that this land and this people will emerge with a higher, even stronger resistance in a different form. Because it's just like, it's not the same when a snake sheds the skin. I don't want to give this analogy, but it's really from each movement, another movement is born. Because these movements are just the banners under which indigenous people fight for their land. So if Hezbollah is changed in politics, if Hezbollah is disarmed in weapons, if Hezbollah is not even there, there will be another Hizb, another party, Hezbollah, the party of the people instead of the party of God. And that party will also be continuing that struggle because this land is Lebanese and this land is Palestinian. And we look like it and we breathe like it and we will die fighting for it. Regardless what you name us, how you shape us, how you arm us or you don't, you cannot forget and you cannot surpass the blood that was shed here in this land, even in the past year, has made millions of new young fighters for our cause who are now witnessing the realities of what you are and what we are.
And it's so important, Ghadi, that we hear this perspective from somebody who is from this region, because the Western corporate media is so good at just kind of painting this with a one-stroke brush, this caricature that the people of Lebanon or South Lebanon or even Hezbollah are just simply like barbaric militants, when in reality they are human beings who are constantly being attacked. Their land is being stolen from them by an occupying expansionist force, this Israeli Zionist entity. And the people are not going to forget, their martyrs. This flow of blood that is happening from Israel's destruction of South Lebanon. People are not going to just say, okay, we're going to put down our arms and that's it and just take it as it is. No, people are going to continue fighting because it's their right. It's their international right. It's their human right. And so, thank you for speaking in the way that you do. And of course, providing that historical context is so important to an American audience because, Americans, I'm going to say it again, we are the most propagandized people on the planet. We have a corporate media. 90% of our media is owned by just 6 corporations, and we are just drowning in corporate media propaganda. And so it's so important to be able to hear that perspective and be provided with that context. So we appreciate that. And just to speak more on the point of Lebanon, Lebanon has just appointed a new army chief, Joseph Aoun, as president. Lebanon has been at a political impasse for a while without a head of state since October of 2022. So can you tell us a little bit about who is it Aoun? I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And what will this mean for Lebanon?
Just to give, I want to respond to the main idea that you spoke about before we get into Lebanon. The media, the propaganda, and the this one stroke is a very utilized, a very important part of the war. It's a very important part of the war. So this is just as the bombs. This is why we see them shaping it as one. But I raised this there in local media, and I want to raise it in English media for you and all your viewers. I dare anyone in any shape or form to bring me one piece of proof, one video proof of any Hezbollah Lebanese person committing any atrocity anywhere in any shape or form of war in Syria or Lebanon or Palestine or anywhere in the world. I dare you to find anything. And to all of these people, I just want you to Google or to TikTok any Israeli soldier and to see what their stances are on rape, on murder, on killing children. And this is just enough to debunk the whole media warfare about who we are or what we are as people and as groups. Going back to Lebanon and to your question, and actually, there's a sense of positivity in Lebanon, regardless of the alliances, regardless of the fact that in Lebanon there is no sovereignty. We don't choose for ourselves. But in Lebanon, there's also a fact that the whole Lebanon was formed, cut by the French General Gouraud and announced by him after the French mandate was in place when they took us from the Ottomans. So we weren't free, and then all of a sudden we stopped being free. It's a process. So in Lebanon, sovereignty was never there to start with. So some people want to be optimistic and some people want to be pessimistic. They be pessimistic by saying that the Americans wanted that, the Americans and the Saudis did that, and the Americans and the Saudis finalized that. So this will not be promising because these are two forces that want what is in their best interest. But a larger Lebanese society is saying this is very good for Lebanon because regardless of the affiliations, it's the first time that we don't have a warlord in position or a tried politician in position, because usually in Lebanon there are concessions and deals between the sects, and then everybody, corrupt or well, they just rule together so that no one um, disrupts it. It's just like there's a football game and anybody who's not in the game is going to take the ball. So there's no game if nobody, if not everyone is in the game. You understand me? So this always the disruption. If not every sect or every part is in the governance, somebody is disrupting something. So when they all have a deal, it's good. This new position, this new office, this new presidency and prime minister comes at a time, at a decisive time where we will be witnessing the 1701, the ceasefire, the quote unquote disarming of Hezbollah. So these will be dividing times if we want to talk about them as in the terms and the terminologies of the past. In the past, what is happening today used to be a breaking point between pro-Hezbollah and anti-Hezbollah people in Lebanon. Let me speak to you and honestly. I mean, these are facts that people cannot whitewash. 2 years ago, these names, these things would have been a breaking point between the Lebanese people. But today, they are not, because the facts are different. Because when you are owning a regional power with ballistic missiles on top of your management with all of yourself, it's different from when you are just emerging from a destructive war with the NATO and the United States of America and Israel and the alliance of the Arabs and the locals, and you have $1 billion of losses, and you have hundreds of martyrs and thousands of martyrs, and so you cannot really argue the way you would. So Hezbollah needs to lean with the storm for now. But the terminologies and the points of view for me should be different. I think it's better, just like I said about Syria, with a lot of difference. Jolani is a terrorist. Our president is someone promising with respect, and he has no file, but everything good in his everything he says and everything he does has been emerging very well. He fought the terrorists as an army officer and an army leader in northern Lebanon and in many places, and he's from South Lebanon. But regardless, if he is affiliated with the US and the West, it's good to have someone that is directly and openly that, rather than to think that you have an ally in office. But when he's governing and ruling, you have the United States of America's ambassador saying everything. So Hezbollah had Michel Aoun and had Saad al-Hariri before that, before the whole thing. So what did they accomplish on the ground in Lebanon with people who they weren't affiliated with America? Really, weren't they? With whom were they affiliated then? It was always like that in Lebanon. It's just the way you look at at the things and the way you name them. And right now, after the destructive war, after Israel was not able to take 1 meter of our land in the war, they are trying to do that in politics. They're trying to tell us never to fight again. They're trying to take from us, not the army, the ability to want to fight by telling you you have lost everything. You go back to the facts. You go back to the elections. You go back to the society. You have lost a round in the war, maybe, but your source of power did not change. So you're only destined to stand up and live another day in a different shape and form and to adapt to the new realities.
All right, so we have just had a little bit of technical difficulties with my camera that has turned off, so we apologize for that. So I'm just using a different.
Now I'm feeling like solidarity, because in Lebanon we have these issues, in Syria and Iraq we have these issues, not in the United States of America.
So this looks like it's just a my camera died, unfortunately, and it's not charging. So I'm so sorry about this. But anyways, just to continue this conversation with you, Ghadi, you recently visited Iraq, and I think a lot of people are curious to know about the political atmosphere there, considering, Iraq has been a big focal point of resistance attacks towards Israel. And then we have Israel's attacks against Hezbollah, and then we have the fall of Bashar al-Assad. So that resistance pocket has basically been removed. So what is the political atmosphere like at the moment in Iraq?
Well, to tell you, for reality, I think some Iraqi resistance groups did some efforts in this war, but I think the general vibe in Iraq now is the achievable and the doable. And domestic politics is so refreshed and revamped by the reconstruction and by the internal. It really looks different. Baghdad looks like it's up. There's a new, fresh kind of domestic politics that wasn't there 2-3 years ago. And I think the Iraqis really want to keep what they have achieved in terms of internal stability. This is why the shape of their resistance is not going to be confrontational. I don't think the confrontation will be in Iraq. I think the confrontations will be bound to Syria. The moment that the resistance groups would want to recollect or reoperate, I think Syria's chaos would be a ground that is susceptible for that, and Iraqis' role will be allowing that, nothing more. The actual eye of the fire now is Yemen. And I don't know if it's going to hold on until Trump is in office or before that. It's just a matter of these days. I think they're not going to let Yemen go with all the disruption and all the active and effective role that the Yemenis have played in preventing the empire from having its way and aiding Israel like it once. Well, Yemen did not only attack Israel. Yemen disrupted the international maritime trade route. And this is very dangerous to the empire. And I don't think the British and the Americans and the regional powers um, care about anyone more than Yemen right now, to defeat them or to try to weaken them. And all eyes are there. And when it comes to Iraq, I think the Iraqis have suffered before everyone else in the region, from the American invasion to ISIS to the divisions to the sectarian clashes and problems to Al-Qaeda. And now, after all that has happened in the region, Iraq has played its political role not like a nation that is just surviving, but as a nation that is a bigger brother. They were there for the Syrians, they were there for the Lebanese, and they were there for the Palestinians. And I think it's only fair right now to what we want to ask from the Iraqis is to build a good and strong and sovereign Iraq. And this would be good for the region, nothing else. We don't want them to because there are like some 60 or 70 targets that the Israeli intelligence have been speaking about in Iraq. We want Iraq to be protecting Iraq. We don't want Iraq to be destroying itself without actually gaining an effective way into harming that. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that if the Iraqis continue to resist on their own and they get attacked by the Israelis, nobody's going to protect them. So if they refrain for a while from actively being in the resistance operations and rather being a good and strong community and a trade route and a politics and an ideological and a construction free zone for the region, this itself is a great achievement for all the people and the indigenous people around them.
And what do you think Iraqi resistance factions are actually saying right now in response to the fall of Syria into the hands of al-Qaeda? Do they see Israel becoming stronger because of this, or what is their perspective?
There's a lot of baggage between the Iraqis and the Syrians, if you want to start with. You know, the Iraqis find that Bashar al-Assad was an active role in strengthening al-Qaeda in their land sometimes. Because in 2003, after the fall of Saddam Hussein, many parts of Syria and the Syrian intelligence worked on that, really. They aided and they helped and they deported some terrorism there. The way they look at the things and the events in Syria is to prevent al-Qaeda from coming back, to fight ISIS and to prevent it from coming back. And they have sent all kinds of messages that we are ready and you cannot pass, whether it's Mohammed al-Sudani, the actual prime minister, or the resistance fractions. I think the resistance fractions in Iraq are a neo movement that they fought the Americans when they were on their land. And they fought ISIS most recently when they tried to, when the Americans tried to resurrect as ISIS, because ISIS was formed by the Americans also. Anyways, so today, I think their ideological prioritization is not, to be realistic, I don't think they prioritize battling the Israelis face to face rather than standing for the Lebanese, the Syrians, and the Palestinians while they do it.
And let's just turn back a little bit to Yemen. I just have two final questions for you. You know, I think one of the strongest points in the Middle East for resistance is the Yemenis. I mean, I think a lot of people would agree with that. And so we're now seeing the US, the UK, and Israel jointly attacking Yemen in response to Yemen's Red Sea blockade and attacks against Israel. Of course, Yemen is acting, as it says, in defense of Palestinians and the genocide in Gaza, and they would stop everything if Israel would stop the humanitarian crisis there. What do you think is in store for Yemen moving forward?
God bless Yemen and the Yemenis and the innocent people everywhere, because they don't care who they're killing, who they're bombing, what they're throwing, where. When the American bunker buster bombs were thrown on Lebanon, they killed countless innocent people. And we always have to remind ourselves that this fight is not just a movie we're watching. Many innocent people in Yemen have been suffering. I mean, thousands have been starving to death in Yemen for all these years. And the CENTCOM and the Americans have been trying to like change the facts in Yemen in all shapes for many years, and they didn't. This is why I think it's not going to be easy. Because what can the Americans do? Strike Yemen? They do. With new kinds of bombs, they did everything consistently for 8 years with the aid of the Saudis, which is like every day from the CENTCOM. Lloyd Austin, the former defense minister, was actually living in the CENTCOM center in the Gulf to to be there and to make sure that Yemen would be defeated, and it wasn't. So I don't think it's going to be easy. But I really, after what we saw and witnessed in Lebanon, from the intelligence and the artificial intelligence use to the pager attack, to these kinds of infiltrations and utilizing technologies. So you fear assassinations, you fear that this is how they will deal with the Yemenis, and I think the few upcoming days and weeks will tell us more about that. And unless the Yemenis get what they want, I don't think killing and bombing will change the fact Yemen is a vast nation and they have nothing to lose at that point, and they have everything to win.
Yeah, I mean, we see that from the Million Man March every Friday. I mean, it's not just 100 people, 200 people, or thousands. It's like millions of Yemenis come out every single Friday to march
And the
in support.
importance,
Yeah.
sorry, Manar, but the importance here, because we just spoke about Iraq, is that ideologically, the Yemenis have their own very passionate ideology about what they're doing. They're not in an alliance with someone else. They chose.
Yes.
It's very wrong to say that the Iranians chose that Sayyid Nasrallah would support Gaza and enter in the solidarity war that resulted in his martyrdom. It was his choice, not the Iranians.
Yeah.
Same goes for Yemen. Yemenis ideologically took the decision to support Arab Palestine as Arab Yemenis. This is their own decision and their own test as a power, as a nation, to prove themselves. What would they take? What would they force? How would they play that battle out? The days will reveal. But I will tell you, Manar, today, to me as a viewer, as someone who's like watching what's happening in what was called the axis of resistance, Yemenis today are what Hezbollah was in the 90s time. They are now building their military glory, and they are now freeing and liberating their own nation in their own way. Their strength is like it is something to be taught in history, because the warfare on Yemen was consistent and they just became stronger. And now it's a birth for Yemen as a nation, as a power, as not only regional. It has proven itself the most impoverished one of them all, but the most courageous one of them all. And they were able to hurt the boss, the USA, directly.
Yeah, I mean, and Yemen has endured its own genocide from, the U.S.-Saudi blockade, this illegal blockade that has starved the Yemeni people. Over 23 million people, even until this day, are still starving. And yet they come out on the streets every single day, like you said, because of an idea that they're going to stand in solidarity. Nobody forced them to do this. It's because
They're
they
very
care.
courageous.
Yes.
By nature, I have visited Yemen in year 2011. I saw Adan, I saw Bab al-Mandeb, I saw Sana'a. I want to tell you, Manar, really the spirit of the Yemeni people is not to be compared to any. I've visited like many countries and seen many nations. They know what they're doing, and they are maybe the actual manifestation of how a human, you listen about these people like let go, to detach, to not to have anything material, okay? So they're actually the manifestation of how he can be smart and educated and have nothing but courage. And the
Wow.
idea of them winning is just like a story ending with the underdog winning, you know? So
Yeah.
in this region, Yemen is the cultural heritage of Arabs, the actual richest historically. All the stories and the legends of Arabs, Hadramaut and these places in Yemen, and even the Prophet Muhammad. So all these stories about this great culture, you go to Sana'a, you see the architecture, you see the richness in the culture. And I think they are the living proof that no matter what you do, you cannot uh, change the spirit that is made for the actual life. You cannot paint it and change it. So Yemenis, regardless of the poverty, the problems, today they resurrect as the minaret of the Arab uh, conscience and the Arab courage and the Arab um, ethics that we hear about in history and in poetry and so on. They are the ones that they said we will not sit by and watch the children of Gaza being slaughtered. And they are the poorest. I look at Yemen and I look at Qatar, for example. What did Qatar do?
Yeah.
Qatar, so-called pro-Palestinian Qatar, what did they do? They continued to allow the Americans to take weapons to the Israelis from their land and their base all throughout the war, while their Al Jazeera was telling us how humanitarian they are and how much they love Gaza. And then the minute that Israel started on Syria, they just forgot about Israel.
Yeah, I mean, there's
So
no question that Qatar is very much pro NATO when it comes to that.
and it's pro-Israel, but it lies about it. It's pro-Israel. And the Arab nations and all of the Gulf nations, the first nation that started naming Israel was Al Jazeera, was Qatar's minaret of making the propaganda in the region. And when you say in your questions, Manar, that the most propagandized people are the Americans, well, the American industry of propaganda has made it even worse for our people. So the American propaganda that is used on the American beautiful people to make them forget their own rights, to like destroy their societies. The same is being used to actually colonize our societies and to kill us. They focus on. It's so cute when you see CNN being too emotional about Saidnaya prison, forgetting the Abu Ghraib prison where they used to rape Iraqis. It
The
was an
American.
American prison in Baghdad. So it was really cute to see these double standards once again. But I'm so lucky. We are so lucky. We are the generation that we have MintPress. And I'm telling you, Manar, even long before I've discussed things with you, I used to follow you and to tell people to follow MintPress and other similar outlets that are not the mainstream media. They speak in English because for our communities, when you see someone speaking in English from the other side of the world and telling you, you're a human, you matter too, you change your whole concept about that community.
Yes.
Some people used to shout in Yemen in the protest, death to America, death to Israel. Today, when they see a person like you, they say no. They say, I don't want death to America. They say, I don't want Los Angeles on fire. They say, this human is just like this human. It's not all evil. It's not about it's not about the people. It's about the administration and so
Exactly.
on. This is the importance of the media outlets. We're not here speaking to get likes. And trust me, Manar would make way more money without doing this whole thing. In media and mainstream media, just writing one report is worth 2 weeks of work when you're working on your own. I know it because I'm a journalist, and we do it not only to put news out there for likes and for comments and for interaction. We do it for the people who are listening to us to bridge, to see like, you know, to see that there are people in the American society that do not want to do this to us, and there are people in the Lebanese and the Iraqi and the Palestinian society that condemn all shapes of terrorism and all shapes of brutality to any human in the world, but just don't come and colonize us and tell us We are the terrorists, We're not gonna sit back. And here I quote Yahya Sinwar, who's the world most infamous propagandized figure. They say he's a terrorist, yeah. So he said, Yahya Sinwar said, we tell the world, don't expect us to be well-behaved prisoners and well-behaved victims. So these people of this land are not going to be well-behaved um, human organs, because this is what they do to us. They kill us, and then they take our bodies and they confiscate the organs, and they return the bodies. They did this in Gaza. This is what Israel is. And when they don't do it, when we survive, they rape us in the prisons. This is what they did in Sidi Timan. This is what the Israeli media reported. This is what the American mainstream media refuses to report, while still repeating lies that have been debunked time and again about what happened on October 7th. So time to wake up and watch more of MintPress News, I think.
Ghadi, what a great way to end the conversation. And we are honored to receive this endorsement from you. I'm glad to know that you've been following us for a long time.
Well, I'm a fan.
Well, that's honestly an honor. So thank you so much. I know we've taken up more time than we had planned for. So we appreciate you going over the history, providing us with the context. It's so important to break through and pop those propaganda bubbles like you've just done. And I apologize for my camera and mic issues, but I hope that we can have you on again very soon. Thank you, Ghadi.
Me too. Thank you.